Good morning. Welcome to the Big Buzz Breakfast Club. We are so excited for today's conversation about unlocking generosity and effective techniques for individual giving. Just a couple of housekeeping tips as we get started today. So this session is being recorded and it will be shared with you post-event by email. Please be sure to answer the poll questions that we have put up. It will help our guests be able to direct answers more effectively for those who are in attendance today. And then you can put any questions in the chat today. Questions will be answered at the end. And then if you need to adjust your closed caption settings, please feel free to click the button at the button at the bottom of your screen to be able to do that. My name is Melissa Legowski. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Buzz Idea Group. For those of you who might not be familiar with us, we know that many nonprofit executives lack the time, staff, skills, and the funding they need. Big Buzz Idea Group fills gaps in management, marketing, and events so that you can focus on the big picture and position your organization to thrive. We do these breakfast clubs for our audience on the second Thursday of every month from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Central Time, and we really like to invite more guests and spread the word. It's a great free resource to help organizations grow. Speaking of growing organizations, we do have a couple of programs that we are working on this fall. We have our Run Your Nonprofit Like a Boss Summit that will be taking place in November on the 7th in Oak Park from 9:30 to 4. And it focuses on all of the things I wish I had known the first time I became an executive director. So it drills down on strategy, strategy without huge budgets. Not everybody can do the big long-term strategy right out of the gate. So we've got some great tips for keeping that quick and easy. Finances, HR, culture, and leadership. So we invite you to check out our website to learn more. And then also we are offering the Power Cell, and this is a nonprofit mastermind. Again, it comes from when I previously was an executive director myself, and I felt like I always had to be on with every audience we were serving. So this is a safe, confidential space where we bring the same 3 leaders together on a monthly basis to be able to just ask questions of one another, share experiences, do some, collaboration, brainstorming for solutions, in just a really safe space that's meant for the leaders of these organizations that participate. And we're offering a special in the month of September to all of our Big Buzz friends. Now, on to the meat of the day. We are really super excited to be able to have Christopher Chanston, who is the Vice President of Institutional Advancement at National Louis University, and Judith Coleman, Associate Director of Development and Donor Relations at Covenant House, Illinois. They are our experts this morning, and I'm very excited to be able to welcome them and share their expertise. And I would love to start out, Judy, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about your background and how you got into annual giving. You're still muted.
I think I'd know that by now. Thank you, and thanks everybody for coming. I'm delighted to be here and always glad to see that there are so many people who want to learn more about our industry. I have been doing development work for more decades than I care to admit, but happily so. I love this work. I think that what we do is priceless, as the commercial says. I have worked on annual giving. I've been in charge of it, and I've worked on it pretty much my whole career. My primary focus has been major giving. But right now, where I work at Covenant House, Illinois, we have a staff of 5 for our development team, and I am in charge of all donor relations. And so that's major donors as well as our annual giving program. So I am working in the midst of what we'll be talking about today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Christopher?
Good morning, everybody. Christopher Chanston. I am actually a musician by education. I grew up thinking I was going to play the French horn in an orchestra somewhere, but life had very different plans for me. And like many development professionals, I stumbled into the profession because who goes to school thinking I'm going to grow up and ask people for money for a living? So since entering the profession, I've worked in a number of organizations and sectors, performing arts, social services, early childhood education, K through 12 public education, and now this is my first stint in higher education. I've worked in shops of many sizes. I've been a sole operator, the only full-time development professional, and then part of a 20-person team. At NLU, I am looking at a team of 13 people. And as the vice president, I'm overseeing all functions of advancement and alumni relations, which includes individual giving, major gifts, grants, and operations, et cetera, et cetera. I actually grew up in the foundation and operations world, so major giving and annual giving has been a relatively newer part of my portfolio. In my current role, I'm actually overseeing those functions, people who do that work specifically, but I've had a lot of experience in terms of connecting with individual donors, trustees, and building engagement opportunities for whatever organization I'm working with. I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Excellent. So, and looking at our poll results this morning, it looks like we have a very robust kind of, we run the gamut on the whole spectrum for the size of the teams and the amount of fundraising that the goal they're working towards. So this should be really good conversations, and I'm looking forward to diving in. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with you, Judy, but I'm going to have you both answer this question. Can you share with our audience what you think the secret sauce for successful fundraising is?
So I see fundraising as an art and a science. With the science being the basic technical activities that never change, like correctly recording your gifts and acknowledgement of those gifts, using restricted gifts per the donor's desire, etc. There are certain things that never change. The art is connecting with donors, learning what motivates them to support your organization and creatively engaging them in ways that encourage them to continue their support over time and increase it. And I said ways, plural, because all donors, major donors, as well as your segment of donors, for example, within your annual giving campaign, they are motivated by different things. So we have to be creative in making them feel like they are our partners in the impact that we're making on people's lives and the community. And then when they do offer their support, you have to steward them correctly. And I'll go a little bit into stewardship more later on in our program.
Thank you. Christopher?
So I really appreciate everybody answering the poll. And let me just say that I do understand when, having been a solo operator, the only full-time development person, some of the things that you have to do when you're in a small shop are very different from a larger shop where you have more resources or more capacity or more people. So I'm going to offer advice that has worked for me in my individual organizations. I recognize that everybody is in a unique situation, right? Depending on the type of organization, the cause, your funding, diversity, et cetera. I hope that you can come away with at least a few things that might be helpful to you. You may hear things that you already know, and say, like, why is he saying that? But I hope it is whatever we share with you today is going to be helpful. So what I think the secret sauce for successful fundraising is really having buy-in from all levels of the organization. And that's board, leadership, colleagues. In higher education, that's also clients, our students. So what we're doing at NLU, for example, is trying to strengthen and build a culture of philanthropy. And that's where everybody recognizes their responsibility in generating revenue, whether directly or indirectly, by being an ambassador for the organization in connecting with donors, prospects, alumni, students, faculty, and staff. And that's easier said than done, right? What we try to do is, for example, from day one of new hire orientation, I'm in those new hire orientations and presenting on the importance of philanthropy and why it's really really incredibly important that everybody understands their responsibility in creating a positive experience for our students so that they can go on to become alumni who want to give back to the organization. It's me connecting with board of trustees and helping them understand their roles in opening networks. It's working with executive leadership and bringing them to meetings with donors. It's helping students understand from day one of their student orientation that philanthropy is what makes scholarships, emergency grants, the food pantry, makes all of those things happen. So building this culture of philanthropy, I think, is really important. Again, that's buy-in from all levels of the organization. The second thing I'll say is having a clear sense of the organization needs is really important. A menu of opportunities is essentially. So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to help, in our role as development professionals, we should be able to speak to that very, very quickly and say, here's a menu of things that where private philanthropy would have a significant impact.
I really love all of that. I think that's getting organizational buy-in at all levels, I think is what I hear to be the most common problem. And it's not, right? It's not a one-man band. It's not one person's responsibility. It is really got to be in the culture. I think that that's really great. And to Judy's point, it is such a balancing act of trying to do all of those pieces that are super important. So I'm excited we'll talk more about stewardship too.
I would just add that I saw that a number of the people on the call are in a one-person shop, and that buy-in is most important when you're the only development person on staff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Judy, this one's for you. Are there any big lessons that you have learned the hard way relative to annual appeals? And what was the impact of the situation for your organization?
Um, I'd say the biggest lesson or the hardest lesson I've learned about annual appeals was fortunately early in my career, and it's something that I've carried with me through the years. I was with an organization that didn't have one. There wasn't buy-in. And, I know we have people with all different levels of experience, but I will say that the annual appeal is really the base from which you build all of your other giving. You raise general operating program and support. You broaden support from new donors. You upgrade your first and annual donors to major donors, renew donors, et cetera. And for many organizations, this campaign is at the end of the year, the end of the calendar year, usually. The organization that I spoke of almost closed its doors after I left. I could see the writing on the wall when the leadership did not want to get behind this effort, no buy-in. To Christopher's point, so I found employment everywhere, elsewhere. I just left. And as I said, they almost closed the doors because when you don't have an annual appeal, you're missing your opportunity to build your family of supporters. You're missing the opportunities to raise a full pool of funds that you can use to run the engine of your organization and, of course, reconnect with your donors. Without it, you eventually start to lose donors and a consistent cash flow. So.
Excellent. It is so important, the buy-in. You've got to have that help. So Christopher, as we embark on year-end giving time, can you share any tips for creating a compelling narrative that drives donor engagement and increases giving?
So let me address the technical aspect of an annual appeal. I mean, everybody will have different opinions about this. Some people will say the 2-pager, double-sided is the way to go. Some people will say, oh, it's 1 page and put your annual report in there. And some people will say, do a holiday card appeal, right? Like include an incentive or something with your annual appeal in order to encourage donors to give. I think this really depends on your organization, if you have the resources to outsource it, et cetera. When it comes to the actual content, what I always strive to do in our annual appeals is to balance between success and the need for support. So I think people want to support organizations that are doing well. And yes, we can go rah, rah, rah. We've got new student enrollment up. Our revenues are doing great. And then we need to make that pivot to, well, even though our organization is doing well, our students still need the support. So you get annual appeal letters that are 100% doom and gloom. The world is falling. We need all the resources that we can muster. And I personally, I think that's a little bit off-putting. But again, that's just a personal preference. If you have the ability to do some A/B testing, see what works for your audiences. If you're within an institution that has the resources to do that, that might be something you'd want to consider. I think donors really respond to outcomes and impact. They want to see, how many students are you touching? How many, how many students are taking are participating in emergency housing? How many students are you graduating on an annual basis, et cetera? So it's that, outcomes, impact. What are the donors' gifts being used for? I try to use more inclusive language, like we as a community, us together, donors and institution. These are the things that we are doing to impact our students' lives. And then I also try to use more direct language. So rather than saying your gift is making a difference, I like to pivot to saying you are making a difference, which is again a little bit more direct, but also using inclusive language around community, et cetera, et cetera. I hope that's helpful.
It's wonderfully helpful. And I think these days too, right, on the A/B testing, it's a little bit easier even when you are doing a digital campaign to kind of support any actual mailings, physical mailings that you are doing. And so you could kind of mix it up to do a little bit more of that testing and see what's the most impactful. That's the other thing too, I think about the organizations at the end of the year that do the multiple reminders about their campaign, and it's just the same email every time. I think there's a lot of missed opportunity there. All right, Judy, can you share examples of successful campaigns or initiatives that significantly boosted individual giving for any of your organizations?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer this one a little bit differently. And I think the most successful things to boost individual giving are cultivation and stewardship throughout the year. In other words, I would say there is no silver bullet that's going to make people magically give you gifts and increase gifts. We have to earn those increases or continued giving by reminding donors, as Christopher said, of impact, reminding them what we do, that they helped us to get there, and that we are best positioned, to do what we do through the impact on people's lives. So think of it like this. We don't want to be like the donor's brother who only calls when he wants money. We want them to remember us and to know that we are thinking of them all throughout the year. By reminding them through social media, direct mail, phone calls, e-blasts, whatever you have the bandwidth and the budget to do. But we want to let them see how their gifts have been instrumental in helping the organization to reach its goals, to carry out its mission. And then it's only logical that they will want to continue giving. When it comes time for your annual appeal, you tell an impactful story impactfully. This is what we have done because of your support, and we plan to do more or this other thing with your continued support. But they need to hear from you in between and not just at the end of the year. When you're asking for an increase in gifts, it needs to be more than we just need for you to give us some more money just because. You need to build a case and tell a story well.
And help them see the vision, right? I think so often we're working day in and day out in our organizations, and we forget that they have a limited touch sometimes or a limited perspective. And so taking the opportunity to really share the vision of where you're going is so important. I think all of that really valuable information, Judy.
If I can just add to that, I think it's this notion that donors are not ATMs. And in a culture of philanthropy, donors can be seen in multiple ways: time as volunteers, talent, treasure, financial gifts, and testimony as well, like
Mhm.
being an ambassador or advocate on your behalf. So there are many ways that we can cultivate our donors and engage them exactly in the ways that Judy is saying, so that we can kind of prime them for when the time is right to actually make a solicitation.
Can
Love
I just
that.
say one more thing? I
Of
have had
course.
this happen to me a number of times, and that is, no, donors are not ATMs. And just because we happen to encounter someone who has significant capacity, they might not want to give it to us. Just because they have it doesn't mean they have to give it to us. How many times have I heard, well, I asked them for X and I know they can afford it. Well, maybe you don't know them as well as you should, because clearly they have it and clearly they might not want to give it to us. So next, we'll find another one.
Love it. Love it. Christopher, you talked about excuse me, about using statistics and kind of telling your story. What metrics or indicators should organizations be tracking to demonstrate the effectiveness of their organization, their efforts, and how can they utilize and apply data collected in their work to be able to make improvements going forward too?
Sure. So let me just give the preface that I think this really depends on the size of your organization. We're recognizing that some of you are not full-time development folks, and development functions are included as part of all the myriad other things that you're doing. What I would say is do what is manageable within your capacity, but also recognize that metrics can help make the case for increased resources. So, for example, at NLU, when we know that there's lots of opportunity for giving, I can show metrics that say, well, we have this pipeline of people. We know that there are opportunities here, and this is why I'm making a request for more staff to add to my team. So let me start with some basics around metrics, and I apologize if some of this is a little bit redundant for those of you who are in larger shops. But of course, you look at new donors, right? You want to see who's coming in. You want to take a look at who's renewed. So that's year over year, one fiscal year to the next. You want to look at increased giving or decreased giving by donor. So how many donors actually increased, how many donors decreased. You want to look at your what's called, the acronym is LIBUNT, but it's last year, but unfortunately not this. Some people call it LIBUNTY. They add last year, but unfortunately not this year. But I call them LIBUNTs. That's how I grew up with them. LIBUNTs or SIBUNTs. Some year, but unfortunately not this. So you can look and see who gave last year, but didn't give this year. Who gave at some point in the past, not last year, but who is who is in your potential pipeline to renew. Maybe they gave 3 years ago, and they should still, I think, they'd be considered one of your SIBUNTs, and I think they're worthy of continuing to cultivate and possibly solicit as well. We look at board affiliation giving or engagement as well. So if trustees in our database, we connect trustees to those in their networks that they've introduced to us. So if trustee X has said, here's prospect A, B, and C, what we can do is say, well, trustee, of your friends, here's what they're giving, and here's how they're engaged with the organization. They came to these events, etc. And that informs a conversation about, do you want to keep them engaged? Or it's clear that we've been trying to connect with them for 10 years at this point. Maybe they're not the right prospect for our institution. Okay. So I would say those are, for me at least, some of the very basic things. Depending on where your shop is, you can get more sophisticated. Touch points leading to a successful close, right? If you can say, well, I tracked an email, we had a meeting on this date, we had the donor came to an event, they received a newsletter, and then we made a solicitation, right? 5 touch points, or maybe it takes more. being able to at least see what trends might be happening in the number of touch points leading to a successful close, meaning a successful gift, that might be helpful to you. It might indicate, okay, maybe we need to do more cultivation events beforehand, or maybe a annual giving officer or a major gifts officer is not doing what they should be doing, right? If it's taking 12 points to for a major gift officer to at least have one conversation about somebody's intent to give to your organization, I think that's a little too long in my book. But it's a helpful way, at least for you as a supervisor, to be able to see how your team or individual program or gift officers are performing. Engagement as well. How do donors connect with your organization? Are events more successful? Are newsletters? What's the type of content that people are looking at? And that leads to click-through, open rates on emails, unsubscribe rates on emails, I think is another thing that you might want to look at. And then we did talk about this briefly, A/B testing on your mailings. For us, we actually tried to scale back on the number of direct mail pieces, snail mail. That actually didn't work for us. Our audience is older, so we're switching back to actually sending out more direct mail. It is more costly, but that's unfortunately just based on who's in our constituent and our alumni base. I hope that's helpful.
That goes back to really knowing, right, who your audience is and really meeting them where they're at for that stewardship, right? It's the relationship building and understanding. And then you mentioned too, like, right, 12 touch points is too many. Do you have kind of a ballpark of how many you think is the sweet spot?
That's a really great question, and I wish I could tell you.
Okay.
Like, this is the magic number. Like, we've had donors who have come to us and said, I want to make a gift, and it takes one phone call. I've had situations where it takes 3 years to cultivate a donor. Marketing people will tell you people need to hear from you 7 times in order to understand your product, right? Again, it's an art and science. Judy, in your experience, like, do you have a magic number or an average number?
I don't have a magic number, but I will say the more capacity that we know a donor has, we'll be more patient and they will get more touches. They may get 12. If it takes, 2 or 3 years to really get to the point where they say, yes, you can come for a meeting and we can talk about how much I'm going to give. Whatever time it takes, usually we've had some, like you were saying, Christopher, if it's taking too many years, then okay, maybe, as I was saying earlier, maybe they just don't want to support us, or they don't want to support us at the level that we would like for them to support us.
Well, and I think too, as we think about that, right? I heard when Christopher said like 12 meetings might be too much, but the touch points can also be different, right? So it's a strategy that goes into the behind the scenes.
Well, there's a
Oh,
quality.
go ahead.
Sorry, just let me clarify. There's what we call like a quality of a contact, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have an email. You can say, Judy, you told me this example once that I heard you on a panel. Like, you saw a donor's name on a truck from their business, and you texted it to the donor. You said, "Hey, I'm just thinking of you," right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lighter contact,
Mm-hmm.
quality contact than actually having a conversation with a donor that involves there's a conversation about their support of your institution, right? That's a very different conversation than just, hey, I was thinking about you. How's your summer going? Here's a newspaper article kind of thing. And so, forgive me, 12, I was throwing 12, the number 12 out there. I think if it's taking 12 quality contacts, yes, I think that's too long. But if it's 12 just touch points, came to an event, saw you there, sent you an email, that again, it varies by the donor or prospect.
That's
Yeah,
exactly how I heard it.
we call them HVIs, high value interactions. And so we differentiate between the two when we're looking at the activity that a gift officer is doing.
I love that. I love that. So I think something that I know a lot of people struggle with is also identifying new donors. I don't know if the higher shops have as much, the larger shops struggle with it as much as smaller shops, but I often hear that they want to to find new donors. Judy, do you have any strategies on how they could identify new donors for their organizations?
Sure. I have like a list of some things. Um, First of all, I believe in asking our friends to help us grow. And your current donors are your best ambassadors because clearly they're supporting you and they've already vetted the situation, vetted the organization. I would start with the board and ask them to help you. Now, when you go to the board or you're at a board meeting and you're making your report as a development person and you say, and we want you all to each introduce us to, 3 of your friends that you think will really help us. I, I have found that that is not successful. But one of the things, because everybody comes with something different, but one of the things that I will ask people if they will host a gathering with their network. It could be on site, it could be at their home, anywhere that they choose, but they can bring in people and so that they can learn about the organization. And of course, you follow up with those people to see how they would want to be. How they would want to be engaged with your organization. Another way of finding new donors is at special events. How many times have you been asked to, oh my gosh, my business where I work bought a table and we need to fill some seats when you come. And you have new people who have never heard of your organization who will perhaps be influenced and want to become a part. You can raise your profile in the community with a strong online presence. Social media, your website are some of the ways that you can do that, sending out a newsletter, whether you mail it or send it electronically to share information and impact. Collaborations and partnerships with companies or other nonprofits. That's a way to put you in front of a whole new audience of people. Um, one of the things that we do here at Covenant House. So, for those of you who might not know, Covenant House gives support and services to young people experiencing homelessness between the ages of 18 and 24. And we are 34 houses, 34 locations in 5 countries. And Chicago is the newest location. We've done quite a bit since 2017 when we opened our doors. Our big fundraiser every year is a sleep out where we raise awareness and funds. And it is a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. And I will say this is a major way that we bring in new donors. You know how this works. You're in a walkathon or a bikeathon, and you send people your link and they go to your page and they give you money. We follow through with those people who have given to Christopher's team and, Trisha's team and Lori's team. And we stay in touch with those people throughout the year to encourage them to be part of our supportive family, not just that person's team. So the kind of fundraising campaign you have can really help you to bring in new donors. And yes, that's a shameless plug. November 21st at the CME building. We have a new location this year. Also offer multiple giving options, recurring donations, and Venmo, PayPal, and make giving as easy as possible. If you have a younger demographic, you might think about, like mobile giving, text to give. That's a way that young people seem to respond to. And don't forget, you want to hold on to the donors after the first gift. You don't want to give them, you don't want them to give once and go away because it's easier to keep someone who has already given than going out and attracting a new one.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? And sometimes you don't take that as to heart as you should, but that is a new opportunity and you have to walk them through it. I think I see a lot of times too where people are not appropriately prepared to collect all the information they need for the guests at their event so that they can follow up. So I think that everything you're saying, there's real value in there, real
Mhm,
value.
mhm.
But when we talk about that first giver, and we talk about how they might move forward, or even, right, how you steward your larger donors, it's such an important component in fundraising. You've already mentioned it twice in two other questions. What advice can you share about how to successfully grow and deepen the relationships with donors?
So technically, the stewardship process is where the organization shows it's worthy of continued support, and it's an opportunity to develop lasting and deeper relationships with your supporters. I would say, first off, you want to focus on the donor and the outcome, and not necessarily just the amount of money. So, for example, and I've actually said this before, your altruism is an example for all of us. And because of your generosity, we can build this building and triple the number of jobs we provide. So it talks about the person and how great they are for wanting to give to you, and that they have given, and this is what you're able to do. And so you do it through acknowledgement of gifts. Gratitude is your superpower as a gift officer, as a fundraiser, through donor recognition, honoring of donor intent, efficient use of funds and other resources, to further the mission of the organization. Some suggested ways of stewarding are definitely personalize acknowledgement in a timely manner, even the smaller gifts. And with today's technology, you can create an acknowledgement process and tailor it to different levels of giving. Share impact stories. We've talked about this all the way through. Share impact stories regularly through many channels. And every now and then throw in a video in your online newsletter or in an e-blast that you send out. We all are influenced by TikTok and Instagram, even though we might not like to admit it. Um, you want to provide ways for donors to get more engaged up close and personal, volunteer opportunities. Because when people volunteer with your organization, along with that, they will usually give you money. They keep coming back to help you because they believe in the mission. So it is quite appropriate to ask volunteers to support financially as well. Um, let's see, you want to provide opportunities for donors to give feedback, like surveys, or maybe even when you interact with them. If you have volunteers in the building and you talk to them and they give you suggestions or they express their concerns. So you want to give them those opportunities, and then you want to respond to the feedback. You don't want to just listen, you want to respond. So I would just say, in summary, it's a powerful tool. Stewardship is a powerful tool. And when it's done comprehensively and well, I would say in a strategic way, the results include retention of donors, increased gifts, really committed lifelong donors. We have some people at Covenant House who have been giving for 20, 30 years because they've been given a joyful giving experience. And these days, I think that stewardship and accountability have become very, very, very important to the donor.
I love all of that. And I know, the other thing that I think about is the value of spending the time to deepen the relationships. When you can find out what part of your mission or what program in your organization really touches them the most, it also helps you have better, stronger conversations. And I'm thinking of a time, we do more sponsorship at Big Buzz than annual giving, but I'm thinking of a time we had an organization that was really struggling. And to your point of accountability, even and transparency, we shared that story with somebody who had been really invested, and we were scared. We were like, do we, pull back the curtain and let them know?
Yeah,
But they really rose to the occasion when they understood why it had, what was happening, what the vision was, and how we had a plan to go forward. And it was really refreshing to really know they're a partner in our mission, not just a donor, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I like to call them family.
Yeah, I love that. So, Christopher, what was your biggest aha moment that you've had on your fundraising journey?
I'm not a particularly religious person, but there's a saying that I heard that has stuck with me. And I think it's quite apropos to development and honestly, as human beings. There's a reason that God gave me two ears and one mouth, because I need to do twice as much listening as talking. I'll say that again. There's a reason that God gave me two ears and one mouth, because I need to do twice as much listening as talking. I think when I was earlier in my career, my tendency was to be so passionate and excited about the organization that I was representing that I would kind of do the verbal diarrhea. I can like all the facts, all the figures. This is what we're doing. The organization is great. These are the clients that we're serving, et cetera. And it would almost overtake the conversation. So my tendency now and my guidance to those who connect with individual donors on a regular basis is to lead with questions and ask the donor or the prospect to tell you what's important to them. I always go into these conversations and have somewhat of a facetious question. I say, donor X, I have a dog and pony show for you if you'd like, but tell me what would you like to help? What would you like to know about our organization? What would be helpful for you to hear? And then take it from there. And it's always about following their lead. There is a place for facts and figures, but you don't have to start off that way. So, you start with the small talk. How are your kids doing? How's the summer? How's the weather, et cetera, et cetera. And then as you get to know them, right, you can maybe get to the nitty gritty a little bit faster, but always listen, find out what interests them, ask them, what do you think your legacy to NLU? What would you like your legacy to NLU to be? What interests you about the student population that we serve, et cetera, and go from there.
I always talk about the value of being curious and just leveraging questions in so many ways. That's the start of the stewardship. That's the start of really being able to deepen those relationships to get your best gifts from donors, because you do understand more about them. And when they feel heard and focused on, right, that makes a lot of sense, Christopher. Thank you for sharing. Next question, Christopher. I think that we've heard a couple of times where this has happened, but are there any recommendations you might share today about how to manage in-kind donations, such as Aunt Millie's stamp collection, that might not be something your organization really wants to accept?
Sure. So I think you want to be really careful about accepting donations of property, whether it's real estate or Aunt Millie's stamp collection. I mean, if you're a philately organization, yes, and it makes sense, right? You want to take Aunt Millie's stamp collection and put it in, display, create, and have it available for people to see. Sure, that's great. I think the question is, do you really need or want the donation? Like, what do you intend to do with it? If the intent is that you're going to take that stamp collection and then sell it, and the donor is okay with that, and then you'll take the proceeds from in a cash basis, sure, that's you could certainly do that. Number one, do you have a gift acceptance policy that will allow you to make that decision as an organization? And I think a gift acceptance policy is good regardless of the organization. It's good for cash, for gifts of all types, right? Cash, stock, DAFs, et cetera, and property, right? Typically, your gift acceptance policy would include a gift acceptance committee. This might be a couple of senior leaders in your organization and a number of trustees, maybe a couple of folks who are like from your finance committee or from your advancement or your development committee. And that kind of gives you a little bit of cover, because I know it's not always easy to say no to a donor, especially if this is somebody that has been a longtime supporter of your organization. But it gives you a little bit of cover to say, you know what, we ran this through the gift acceptance policy. And unfortunately, we're unable to accept your gift for XYZ reasons. The second thing is you need to do your due diligence on the acquisition of whatever item it is. So if Aunt Millie's stamp collection, they're unable to ascertain that it was actually Aunt Millie who collected those stamps, or did she acquire them in a non-legal way, right? So you don't want to be saddled with that. Similarly, if somebody wants to donate a piece of property to you, is it environmentally tainted? Is it going to cost you more to clean up that land and then sell it? And the juice, honestly, is not going to be worth the squeeze. So yes, there are opportunities to accept in-kind donations, but I would make sure you run it through a gift acceptance policy first and see if the juice is worth the squeeze. I've been in conversation with somebody who's interested in donating an item to us, not property, an item. Turns out the item is only going to be worth about $100. And in the grand scheme, it's going to be more expensive, time-wise, personnel-wise, to accept that donation, which we don't really need, and then sell it for what could be less than $100, right? So figure out if the juice is worth a squeeze.
I
Yeah,
love that.
we had someone who wanted to give us a diamond necklace. And she said, oh, I don't need this. I don't need to walk around in a diamond necklace. This is fine. And, we told her that our policy did not allow us to accept property. And we suggested that she go and sell it and then donate to us the money. It wasn't $100, but it turned out to be $2,500, which isn't a lot. Again, in the scheme of things, that we would have had to go somewhere and find a jeweler and all of that. And we were like, okay, so you sell it and then come back with the money. It wasn't a necklace, unfortunately, like I think it was St. Louis University that got some, I think, Tiffany jewelry many years ago. They built buildings and all kind of stuff with that. So it wasn't that.
I think that, yeah, you really got to think about the investment of the time and energy, and does it actually cost you more? And I love the idea of having the policy to fall back on, because that helps negate any uncomfortable conversations. It doesn't make it as awkward when you can just say, this is our policy. I love it's been reviewed, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do this. But to turn it into like, but you could go do that. It depends on the conversations you can have and how comfortable and how well you know these folks. So thank you both. So I would like, Judy, I'm going to have you answer this first, but I'd like you both to answer this one. What insights can you share about the future of fundraising, and how do you see like the future of individual giving evolving? I know a lot's changed in these last couple of years. I'd love to hear more about your vision forward. Oh, you're muted.
A few things. A trend that I see in our organization is the haves seem to be giving more, and donors at lower levels are staying flat or even giving a little bit less. I keep reading that trust of not-for-profits is declining. I haven't personally necessarily experienced that, but I think it's important to be transparent in answering questions that may come up with your donors, anything that they may ask. One thing I know for sure, and this is my third point, I don't think we're going to be replaced by AI. I'm not worried about that. As donors move up the donor pyramid, I don't think they're going to give, 25, 100,000, $1 million in gifts to a bot. You can't fake authentic human connection. Shoot, when I'm returning something and I need to call Macy's, I need to speak to a person. And I think that people who are giving particularly major gifts, they're going to always want to interact with a human. And this is what's going to be that part of stewardship that deepens the relationship with your donors.
Christopher, your thoughts?
I think the argument of mail versus email versus text versus social media is continuing. I think there is an increase towards online and mobile giving. However, there's some research recently that says that mobile giving needs a completely different approach. When people are looking at a text message on their phone, their approach to giving is much more transactional and what's in it for them. Again, that's just some broad research that is out there about mobile giving. I do think we're moving in that direction, but like I said previously, it really depends on your audience. Our audience is older, and so we're having to add more direct mail pieces. I think recurring gifts and micro gifts will continue to grow. So this is where recurring is like donors who give on a weekly or monthly or every couple of months. Micro gifts, right? Like rounding up, or this is okay, I'm going to throw $5 towards this organization and $5 to another organization, etc. Collaborative giving is also seeing an increase. This is giving circles where a number of people contribute to a particular fund and they decide where the money goes to. Donor advised funds, you'll hear a lot about this. People are parking their money in DAFs, but right now there's a lot of legal issues around distribution of resources. What the data is telling us that people are putting money into DAFs, but they're not actually spending it. They're essentially just hoarding it because there's no regulation that says you have to spend X% of your principal in your DAFs. Related to DAFs is generational philanthropy. So as the haves have more money, the being able to bring in new generations of people, or I'm sorry, generations within their families is very important as well. So, you might have wealthy individuals who have resources, and they're intending to, they're setting up a family foundation or something. It behooves us as fundraisers to make sure that those donors are including other generations, subsequent generations of their family in those conversations to avoid any awkward conversations in the future between family members that might impact their gifts to your organization. I'll leave it at that.
I love that idea of really having family meetings to be able, again, right? Because now they're going to have different interests. They might have different focuses. So you have to, like, while it's still like an existing donor and supporter, you now have to kind of get to know the next generation to keep them involved and engaged. That's really very sound advice. So folks, I'm going to ask one more question and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So if you have something, please do put it in the chat. I would love to know if you have any last tips for our listeners on how to level up their fundraising efforts. Judy, we'll start with you first.
I'd say take every opportunity to learn about anything related to fundraising. Invest in yourself. And I would say persevere. Consistency is the key. It's like dieting or running or working out. Whatever you do consistently is going to bring the results you desire.
And there's a lot of programs and support organizations out there to be part of to really be able to learn. So yeah, great advice.
And Judy and
Christopher?
I are both members of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Chicago chapter, AFP Chicago. We are, for me, that organization has been a lifeblood, especially when I've been the sole operator, right? It's great to network, great to meet other people. It's hard being the only fundraising person on staff because you don't have anybody else who understands how tough the work can be. And so AFP has been terrific, and that's why both Judy and I give all of our time and resources to that association. And thank you for putting the link in, Tricia. Much appreciated.
I love that, right? The paying it forward and you learn and then you kind of share that knowledge to, just like you're here today, continuing to share that so other people can be more successful in their efforts. I did see a question. Oh, go ahead, Christopher.
Sorry, to answer the question about like level up fundraising efforts.
Yes.
So I agree with Judy that AI is not going to replace human interaction, but it can be your friend. So in higher education, this is a huge thing. And in fact, at our pre-academic year gathering as a staff, which we do all 700 of us across the institution, we brought in a leading AI expert who works at Microsoft. And he says, 72% of employees feel that they don't have the time or energy to do their jobs 100%, like to fully invest in their jobs. 72% of employees feel they don't have the time or energy to do their jobs. 77% of employees are comfortable in delegating some elements of their jobs to AI. So AI can be your friend. I think about ways to use AI to generate narrative, content narrative. I mean, how many different ways can you write a thank you letter, right? Plug it into AI, ChatGPT, and say, warm this letter up and in tone, right? And I think about part of using AI is understanding the right questions to ask the AI in order to get the product you want. AI is great for grant writers. Like, think about those times when you've got a 300 word count limit and you're at 325 words and you got to fit it into this proposal. Throw into ChatGPT and say, hey, summarize this to 300 words for me, or 1,000 characters, right? That's a helpful use of AI. You like more complicated things like using AI to do analysis within your database that might depend on the level of sophistication that you have within your organization. I would say, everybody's afraid of AI, but it can be helpful if you use it in the right way. But also don't rely on it 100%, because what you get out of AI is really just what it's gathering from the interwebs and other users. So it's a helpful tool. It's not the final say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So we've got a couple of questions and we've got just a few minutes, but we have the question, what are your tips for getting more donor meetings?
I'm pointing to you, Christopher.
Oh, okay. Um, use the leverage that you can, meaning if the question is that a donor is not responding to you, or if the question is that like a donor is responding to you, pull a lever, right? Like, is there a trustee that this donor is connected to? Can you go through that trustee to ask? Or, maybe the trustee has more information, right? Like maybe that donor or prospect just underwent surgery and you didn't know about it, or they're going through a divorce, right? There might be contextual information that you don't know about. Donor meetings. So at NLU, we'd like to do a lot of meetings over food. We're very grateful that we have a culinary college, and so we can invite people into our dining room. People love to connect over food, and you say, "Hey, would you like to have lunch in our cafe?" Right? Over lunch hour, which is everybody needs to eat. Meet people where they are, right? Like offer to meet them in their neighborhood or in their home if they're willing to host you, etc. I think there's a lot of, those are some of the strategies I would recommend.
I would add to that too, that I think it's so important as you get to know them as an individual and not just a mass group of supporters, their communication preferences too, right? A lot of people, email's the way to go. Some people, they're texters. Sometimes you got to pick up the phone and make the call. And the other thing too that I utilize is until they've told me no, I also often don't let them fall off if they've got good potential.
Yeah, we have a beautiful facility in East Garfield Park that we just finished this year. A 3-story, 24,000 square foot building. And when I first started and when we first came over here a few years ago, my thing was always come for a tour, come for a tour. It's really great. Come for a tour. Not everybody wants to do that. And as I learned to tell myself, if they don't want to come and see our building and see our youth, then I take the mission on the road, as Christopher was saying. And, I'll come to your office, your home, any place that's convenient for you. I'd like to connect with you.
I love that. Well, this has been a wonderful, wonderful session, and I am so grateful to Judy and Christopher for sharing their time. I know, especially as we head into one of the busiest times of the year for all of the development teams, I appreciate you being with us today. I hope that our listeners have gained a lot of valuable and useful information that they can apply yet this year, put it to practice right away. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you for starting your day with us here at the Breakfast Club.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.